So welcome back to the Sustainable Agriculture Workshop hosted by Andrew College. And today we have Dr. Jane Morrison, who is an assistant professor at Bishop's University out in Canada. And she's also responsible for the program Sustainable Agriculture and Food Systems there in Bishop University. So welcome, Dr. Morrison.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Cool. So my first question I'd like to ask everybody is, could you tell us a little bit about yourself? And could you also tell us a little bit about Bishop's University and the Sustainable Agriculture Program?
Absolutely. So as you mentioned, I'm an assistant professor in sustainable agriculture and food systems. I'm a relatively new faculty member. I've been with the university as a professor since 2020. And I bring with that an expertise in agroecology. So my research interest is creating biodiverse agroecosystems, but not only biodiversity in terms of the environment, but also in terms of the sociocultural factors, which are also being considered within that system as well. As for the program itself, so the Sustainable Agriculture and Food Systems program at Bishop's is also quite new. We've been offering courses in this discipline since 2019. And originally we just had a minor. The students were taking these courses as electives. Eventually we had a certificate and we were really seeing a lot of interest. So what we'll be offering for the first time in September is a full Bachelor of Arts in Sustainable Agriculture and Food Systems. So we've been going through a long process to get this program approved, and we'll be offering that in September for the first time, which is really exciting. We're also developing an educational farm to go with the program. So the program itself, it's pretty unique, especially within our region, because we're looking at agricultural systems from the field all the way to the fork. So we're looking at production systems, but also all the other steps along the food system. And we're looking at it in a very interdisciplinary kind of way, looking at the environmental factors, but also the social and economic factors, which is perfect because we're a liberal arts university. Right. So the students can also nourish those other aspects by taking courses in other programs. And we're still interested in having that experiential learning on the farm, learning for the students, which is why this educational farm that we're building is going to be a really important complement to the program.
Okay, that sounds good. I like the idea of having a Bachelor of Arts in Sustainable Agriculture and actually having an educational farm. That is so important.
Yes.
Not study agriculture without doing the practical component.
No, yeah.
We love that idea. So tell me a little bit about the research projects you're involved in.
Sure. So I'll talk about a few different projects today. One of them, which I'm a little bit further along with, I'm in the analysis stage of, is a project which I actually started during my postdoc, and which has been carried forward into my new position. And it's a project called Agroecological Transitions, Examining a Paradigm Shift in Our Food System. And with this project, I really wanted to look at the status of the ecological agriculture industry of Quebec. I was interested to see what that industry looked like. And I also wanted to know what were some of the challenges, the obstacles for those farmers and how they could be better supported. So that project was carried out by first creating a very large database. It was a little bit more easy to get a hold of all the farms which are certified organic, but making a list of the farms which are not certified but are practicing along those lines was a little bit more challenging. So this was the first step of the project. And then using that in order to assess how they bring their products to market, what types of products they're growing, but also to use it as a mailing list for the second part of the project, which was to create and send out a survey. And that survey was asking those questions. So, what their system looked like, how holistic it was, and also what were their obstacles, what they were finding the most difficult, and how they could be better supported. And the goal was, to find strategies to better support them, but also to inform future research projects that I might want to undertake, practical research projects on the farm about different techniques potentially that would help these farmers with, move forward and to give them a little bit more support. So this is still being analyzed. It was delayed a little bit because of COVID. We were also doing interviews to dive a little bit deeper with these farmers. But now I'm analyzing it. So something interesting which has come up so far is that I was really expecting some more physical barriers in terms of pests or weeds or those types of obstacles. But what's been coming up the most are more of the social obstacles when it comes to transitioning, getting certification, taking advantage of the different programs and the support opportunities that are available.
So you're looking at the entire spectrum, the entire, like what we call in agribusiness, the supply chain, from growing the crops straight to selling the product or making a product, which is pretty interesting. You know, I really like that. And you're interviewing the right people, you're interviewing the farmers, which is awesome, you know, because a lot of researchers tend to forget about the producers. The research.
It's such a broad analysis that it really requires very diverse expertise. So in many ways, I'm learning about new fields as I go, but I'm hoping that my students won't have that problem, if they one day do research in that field.
Oh yeah. But interdisciplinary research is a So my other question is, what are the society-wide trade-offs among efficiency, social equality, and environmental outcomes for agricultural development in societies with like large rural and smallholder populations?
Yes. Okay. So I think it would really depend on the type of agricultural development that we're talking about and how that's put into place. I've been doing a lot of research and teaching about agroecology, and this idea of an agroecological transformation really is based on a bottom-up type approach that is really coherent and involves a thorough analysis and is very context specific. So, I think if that's done appropriately, if it involves a lot of different stakeholders and it's very tailored to the environment, I don't think there necessarily need to be trade-offs. But I think if it's brought in and it's very top-down and it's sort of a one-size-fits-all approach that doesn't take into consideration those factors, then I think that's when you're going to start seeing trade-offs.
Trade-offs, yeah, because I'm thinking that a lot of our programs in ag tend to be a one-hat-fits-all, and sometimes that's not the case. It should really be assessed as a case-by-case scenario. So let's talk about like the transition, because that's like the ideas of one of your projects, right? So how can the transition from the smallholder farmers based in agriculture, when they change to sustainable ag, how can they maintain their livelihood when they do that?
Yeah, so I think it sort of comes back to what I was saying in the previous question. I think if it's a bottom-up approach that really incorporates the perspectives of those smallholder farmers, then we can acknowledge, what's important for them to maintain that livelihood. For what is a livelihood in their eyes? What are the important components of that livelihood beyond just earning a living? In order to, ensure that those are maintained or even enhanced through that agricultural transition. And so in terms of specific strategy, it would also, it really depend on the case. But I know that in multiple cases, for example, in Latin America, they really rely on farmer to farmer networks. These have been really beneficial in supporting the farms, especially during transitions where there's a passing on of knowledge. The research shows that farmers are much more willing to take advice from other farmers.
Right.
And so having this parallel learning or horizontal learning, I should say, is really a great way to aid in the transition rather than all of that information and knowledge coming from the top.
That's very true. So what in your opinion, let's say we fast track farming 30 years ahead into the future, like 2050. Who do you think would be the farmers then at that point in time?
So maybe I'll talk from a Canadian perspective, because it's kind of hard to speak globally on that question. And I know a little bit more about the context of Canada, what's going on with our census data, the programs we have available, and the issues we have in terms of land ownership. So what we're seeing in Canada right now are less and less young people getting involved in farming. We're seeing fewer and fewer family land transfer agreements, and organic agriculture is still a very small part of the market. So if you just looked at that, I would say that it doesn't look like we would be leading anywhere away from industrial agriculture, but maybe a little bit more anecdotally, but based on my experience and what I'm hearing and the vibrations I'm feeling within the community is I'm feeling a lot of enthusiasm from young people. These young people are very motivated, they're very vocal, and they're imagining a very different type of system. A lot of these people are enrolling in our programs and in other programs, so they're getting the educational component to back up that, that inspiration. So I'm feeling optimistic. In general, I'm an optimistic person. So I'm feeling like this young generation with education, with motivation and energy do have the potential to, make some changes that won't come without government support. Right now in Quebec, things are looking also pretty optimistic in terms of government support. There's been a lot of new programs, new policies, a lot of funding for research within sustainable agriculture. Actually, Quebec just set up something which is sort of one of a kind. They set up something called a research network of, a Quebec network of researchers in sustainable agriculture. And so what they've done is they've mobilized the research community that does research on sustainable agriculture, and they've connected us by giving us research grants based on collaborations. And, this is something that was really interesting because I think they meant for it to be a small network, but everybody started joining up. So now we're a network of I believe over 200 researchers. So I think all researchers who are working in this field have come together. And now I'm finding myself on research projects with researchers in a university, several cities away. And this is really great because, especially for us, we're a small university, we're just starting out. This is really helping us to establish our research program to get some really concrete research off the ground on our farm. So that's just to say that, things are looking promising in terms of the support coming from the government to nourish these young people. And so all that to say that I'm feeling optimistic that in, the timeline that you've laid out, that there'll be a transformation taking place and that we'll have more support for smaller scale agriculture and more localized food systems.
Yeah, I agree with you because where we are in Cuthbert, we have a lot of conventional farming. We actually, in the towns around us, all they do is conventional farming. And we have the USDA, so they actually recently released a large amount of money to actually do research in sustainable agriculture, as well as doing the education component where I think it was $50,000 or $80,000, not mistaken, for a grant to go into the high schools to teach about sustainable ag, or to develop projects to guide the younger generation. So I still have hope. 2050, we could shift more into the sustainable ag realm. Especially the younger generation, because just like in Canada, the farming population is aging, so not many younger people go into farming. So I hope that helps, and I hope what we do here, and if any of the governments listening, would help to push, to get more funding and stuff like that. So that's very important. I really like this point.
Well, I'm glad that you share my optimism.
oh yes, I do, because as they say, the famous saying, no farm, no food, right? So, we could have everything else, but if you don't have farmers, we would not be able to eat. We wouldn't be able to be clothed, sheltered, and stuff like that. So,
absolutely.
So anybody, if you see a farmer, shake the farmer's hand and say thank you.
They do hard work.
Yeah. So, if we shift to like agricultural sustainability, right? So, what, for example, are the best indicators that could be used to define agricultural sustainability thresholds, for example, like soil conditions, nutrient cycling, pollination, because I know one of the papers you published had to do with pollination, and how might these be communicated through the actual food chain?
So I have an answer for this because I'm starting a new research project this summer where I'm going to be looking at the integrated potential of biodiverse hedgerows in market gardening systems.
Oh,
So I want to look at, all of the different ecosystem services and advantages that they bring to production, but also sort of the overall functioning of that agro-ecosystem. So I've been looking at all those different indicators that would be important. So I think it sort of applies to your question here. So I would say definitely soil fertility, maybe specifically soil organic matter and signs of erosion. Biodiversity beneath the soil, but also biodiversity above the soil. So how that system is supporting pollinators as well as natural enemies of insect pests. And then we could look at yields, but in the long term. So I'd want to, be looking at that, not just after one season, but really over time, how those yields are sustained. Beyond that, there could be some other things that would be interesting depending on the specific context once again. So for example, if it's a region that is prone to drought, I might want to look for drought resilience. If it's prone to flooding, I might want to look at how it stands up when there is a flood, and those sort of more specific, potentially climate change related factors.
Right. So what's your, like, you talk about climate change, right? So what's your opinion on kind of agriculture help to solve the problem of climate change?
Solve the problem. So, well, I mean, we know that there are certain elements of agriculture which really contribute to climate change by releasing greenhouse gases. So specifically through release of nitrous oxide by the use of synthetic fertilizers, by contributing to carbon dioxide levels, by having large scale land use change, and by not sequestering our carbon. And then by methane with sort of an improper management of livestock. So, we can help to reduce all of those emissions just by changing the way that, we do our farming, by having systems which are less reliant on inputs, which can sequester the carbon, having livestock systems which manage better their emissions of methane. So, that's how I would say that we could help to reduce climate change. But I think we could also help to reverse it by storing more carbon, by having more perennials, by having more, deep-rooted systems, by having the soil consistently covered. But I also talk a lot about in my classes of how we can adapt to climate change, because there are, some changes which are inevitable, especially in the short term. So we have to be resilient in the face of those changes, which we will probably see in the shorter term.
Yeah, so it all comes down, it all boils down to the management of this particular farm or a particular garden. I always think that, a lot of producers don't like to do specific management techniques because it costs a lot of money. That's the reasons why everybody turns to conventional farming, because you could just spray an entire land instead of actually waiting a couple of years for returns, in terms of conservation and stuff like that. So that's pretty interesting.
Well, absolutely. And, by no means can we ever put all of this expectation on the farmer if there's no support, right? Right,
exactly. So you need to have support. Something I looked at a couple of budgets of a couple of countries, and I always see that agriculture always gets a little bit of funding compared to other industries. Our industries are so important, and we should be on the number one list, because we feed everybody.
Yeah.
But we always down at the bottom of the list, and that's something I always believe that needs to be changed. We need to encourage research, we need to encourage educational programs and stuff like that.
And, and if there's funding going to agriculture, where within agriculture?
Exactly. Where exactly? That's correct.
Yeah.
I always believe, I like some of the research you've been doing in terms of, you look at producers and farmers, I always had a theory that most of research need to be geared towards the problems of the farmers. Now, I'm not knocking the microbiologists and stuff like that. I know those processes are also important, but the farmer is the one that he needs to find out how to increase his yield or how to save money and stuff like that. So hope that a lot more funding goes towards more extension activities.
Exactly.
Okay. So let me ask you the last question. I always ask, us being academics, I always ask, academics, what advice, right? Since you deal with students, I deal with students. So what advice would you give a young student who's just coming out of high school or somebody who has left high school for a while and wants to get in the sustainable ag industry or even the extension industry? What advice would you give that student?
In terms of their academic career or their overall career or just life?
In terms of if they want to go into ag or life, or anything like that. Yeah. Because you go in so many directions with this.
Yeah. Yeah, let me just think about it for a second. So I would recommend that they sort of dabble a little bit. So, following along their academic program and be a keen and interested student to, come to class and listen. But beyond that, to get involved with as many programs and opportunities as they can handle, guaranteeing that they're balancing their academic activities. But, like we were talking about a little bit earlier in our conversation about the importance of experiential learning, I think it is by participating in the different programs and activities, whether it be on the farm or, participating with, a food kitchen or volunteering at a local food hub or food cooperative. By having those real life experiences where they're talking to members of the community or potentially farmers, it's, it helps to really make the connection between what they're learning in class and the reality of the situation. So I've had many students tell me that, they really get a lot out of the courses, but when they go out and they volunteer and they spend a summer working on a farm, or they do, one of those experiential activities that I'm talking about, it's then that it really clicks for them why this is so important, what we're learning.
Yeah, I mean, let's say at Andrew College, because we are just a 2-year program, right? We love to push student activities. We love internships, go out there, work on the farms. That's a course we have, it's an internship course. You work for the summer with the producer, and you learn so much than for you being in the classroom. So that's pretty good advice, especially these younger generations that's coming up.
Yeah, definitely. And that's where we're working on getting that put in place for our program as well, because I know it's just so important.
Oh yeah, it's very, I mean, I learned most of my stuff. Like when I was at West Virginia University, I actually spent time with sheep farmers like during the lambing season. There's so much stuff that I would never be able to learn that just in a textbook and in lectures.
Absolutely.
Very important. All right, Dr. Robinson. So thank you very much for spending this afternoon with us. It's greatly appreciated, and we learned so much on most of your projects and the advice that you give, especially to students and those who want to enter into agriculture. So thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. It's been a pleasure. And anybody can email me if they have any questions. I'd be happy to respond and, further the conversation.
Oh, most definitely.
Take care.